Welcome back in, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of Birds 365. Joined now by Brandon Lee Gowton of Bleeding Green Nation. BLG, how you doing on this Wednesday morning, man?
What's up, guys?
BLG, good to see you. LA Rams week, but before we get to that, how surprised were you coming off the Washington Pittsburgh game where the Steelers just blitzed Jaden Daniels from the buses, and Vic Fangio shows up and does the exact opposite. Exact opposite. How surprised were you by that?
I guess not shocked. And then obviously how the Eagles rush with 4 is a little different than how they've done it in previous years where, it's not always literally just the front 4. Sometimes, it's Nakobe Dean or whoever. They send a different kind of 4. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I can't say I'm shocked when it comes to Vic Fangio not blitzing.
But he's taken it to a new level. And these stats are courtesy of our buddy Paul Domowitz. The last 3 games, let me pull it up real quick because I don't want to. The last 3 games, it was 100 pass attempts per the opposition. The Eagles have blitzed 8 times. 8 times. 8 of 100 pass plays. They're down to 18% overall. It's been 8% over the last 3 games. They rushed 4 on 33 of 35 pass plays in the win over Washington. Only 1 zone blitz. And they have the number 1 defense in the NFL. Now, I've been told for years, BLG, that the blitz is the cure to all society's ills. And he's doing the exact opposite, and nobody seems to care because it's so effective. Why has this been so effective?
Well, you don't need to blitz when you can cover, right? You can just trust your coverage unit. You can dedicate less resources to actually getting after the quarterback and, trust them.
How amazing is it that, and by the way, they did not play man coverage until the 8th drive against Washington. How amazing is it to teach young corners in this complicated zone scheme? It could be quarters, it could be cover 9. The Honest NFL charted the whole game. He does a great job on X, Twitter. How amazing is it to teach these young corners to be so unflappable? Because I think a lot of people say, all right, you go cover this guy. No, you're carrying him through a zone, passing him off to another player, and it's all working seamlessly. I'm amazed by it all, BLG, if you can't tell.
Yeah, the communication aspect, like that's just something you wouldn't really, I guess, expect to see so buttoned up from a bunch of rookies. Obviously, there's some veterans in the mix there too, but it's not like total continuity. I mean, you brought CJ back this year. There's new faces in the secondary, and yet they really have this ironed out. And I guess it helps that we're this far into the season maybe and having the experience and but it's really been since the bye. It's been since coming out of the bye.
Yeah.
And where we've really seen that as a turnaround.
Yeah, and it's been very, very impressive, and Vic deserves a lot of credit, but even more so, it's the players. I mean, let's be honest. He can come up with great plans, but they have to execute. So with Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, obviously they've been home runs early in their career. I thought about this for Miami because Jalen Ramsey, I was just talking about this with Mike Gill. Jalen Ramsey couldn't stand Vic Fangio because he's going to the Hall of Fame. He's one of the greatest press cover corners ever, and he wants to play press. And even Xavier Howard is like a 4-time Pro Bowl corner, and he's telling them to play zone all the time, and they're all pissed off about it. Is there something to the fact of getting sort of the unfinished product and teaching them from the ground up? Jordan Mailata is the best example of this overall. Stoutland always talks about, I didn't have to correct any bad habits. Is there something to, the fact that they they're rookies and they accept the role rather than having the superstar who's bitching because he can't play press coverage.
Yeah, I think that's an astute point. I also think like some of the, 'cause I've seen people be like, well, all the Dolphins players were a bunch of babies. And look, I don't cover the Dolphins. I don't know the whole dynamic and story there. But my guess, kind of the way I think about it, is like, not all of that was totally just like a total fabrication. And what I think is that, I think there was some legitimacy to Dolphins players feeling a certain way, clearly about Vic Fangio. And I'm guessing the Eagles, made it a point to kind of work against some of those potential concerns. Like you have Christian Parker here, and the Eagles defensive backs coach who's pretty young and probably pretty relatable with some of these younger defensive backs. So, the way I'm looking at it, I wonder, if it's kind of a situation where Vic Fangio is the bad cop, and then you have, the position coaches, the assistants like Christian Parker, more of the good cop dynamic there. So I think that's part of it as well.
All right, BLJ, let's talk a little offense for the Eagles. It looks great. They're putting up points. They're beating teams. They're 8-2, yet they're 22nd in the passing offense. I say to John often, I thought Kellen Moore was brought here to improve the passing offense. He wasn't brought here to hand the ball off to Saquon Barkley, as awesome as Saquon is. What do you make of it? Is it overrated, not that big of a deal, a concern for you? Where do you lie on the 22nd ranked passing offense in the league?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal ultimately to where they're ultimately want to get to. It's not a big deal in that they can win right now with this formula that they have. But, we're talking about the playoffs, talking about winning a Super Bowl. You're going to need that passing offense to step it up. And there's going to be some games here, I imagine, where, especially if the Eagles are just going to keep having success running it, where teams are going to say, no, like we're not going to you will sell out to stop Saquon Barkley in the run and make you beat us throwing the ball. And, I think teams should be careful about that because it's A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith at the end of the day. But I do think, the passing offense just has to be more in sync. And, when you think about it, it's like, okay, what's the issue here? Well, it's probably not the wide receivers who are pretty good. And I think it comes down to quarterback. I think it comes down to, offensive coordinator, design, scheme, just execution on the whole. Like, I just don't think that unit has been as crisp as it needs to be. And it's kind of like, okay, well, there's hope for them to improve. At the same time, we're more than halfway into the season. It's like, what if this is kind of just mostly what it is?
Ooh, are we then assuming this is Nick Sirianni really calling the plays until they get good? And then it becomes Kellen Moore. Yeah, I agree with Zander. Kellen Moore was brought here to improve the quarterback and improve the passing offense. And arguably that has gone backward. That is the one part of this team that has gone backward. I was looking at PFF all week. They grade 13 categories, BLG. The Eagles are top 10 in almost everything except special teams, which is understandable because of Jake's issues. Run defense, and they're 14th. It's middle of the road. But pass offense, they're in the 20s. With this talent, is that acceptable? And remember, this isn't total offense, which is a lot of NFL. You're talking about total yards. There's a lot of context to that. It doesn't mean that much to me. This is different. This is grading the film. They're saying they're the 22nd, 23rd ranked passing offense from an efficacy standpoint. That is unacceptable with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts, Dallas Goedert, this offensive line, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is Kellen Moore a failure?
It's definitely, I think that's a good way to measure it. It's just like you're not maximizing what you have here with the passing game, or at least it feels that way. So I think he's part of it. I think part of it is we always go back to Jalen Hurts and the time to throw. I mean, I'm looking here at his average this season. He's the second slowest. And, again, he's never going to be one of the fastest in the league. You don't want to neuter his running ability. Like, I get that. But I look back at 2022, I always bring up he was at 2.8 seconds on average. And last year, I think he was like 3.3 or so. This year, again, he's almost at 3.2. It's just like, I just like to get it out a little bit faster some of these times. And I think there's been it's not all on Hurts, but there have been plays that are there to be made on the field that are then left on the field. It's not just like, well, Jalen couldn't do anything. There's nothing there for him. These receivers can't get open, blah, blah, blah. It's not just like, they're totally failing him. I think there's probably times here, yes, where the offensive system isn't giving him enough answers. That's part of it. But there are also times where he's not making the most of what he has been given to work with. And I think when you combine those two, that's where you get this result of a passing offense that feels not totally maximized and also kind of just like feast or famine. It's either like, oh, here's some big plays to some awesome players, but here's like then there's a lack of just like a flow to the offense. It's either just like, oh, they're hitting on the big play or they're not.
You see a lot of people talk about like the routes that the receivers are running. There's nothing quick hitting. They're all downfield. How much stock do you guys put in that, or is that more of a social media talking point that doesn't really have much merit to it? Because I mean, you watch the all 22. Sometimes you do see it's like Jalen doesn't have anybody to throw to under the in the middle or underneath, or AJ Brown's the best slant receiver in football. You'd think they give him more slant routes. They don't do it much. Do you put a lot of stock into that, or is that an excuse?
I think part of it is just Hurts a preference thing, right? Like I don't think Hurts is like the best or has been the most willing like intermediate ball thrower. It's either kind of like the short game or it's like those shots down the field that he's really good at and he likes to take. So I think part of that's a preference thing. But I think the offense can look really good. Like in that Commanders game, Jalen Hurts hits Devontae on that slant there, and that's a big play. Like I just think like sometimes when he makes those quick decisions, good things can happen coming out of those.
I always go back to the 4th and 3 play where everybody lost their minds. Take the point crowd, and that play's there. AJ Brown's open. If the ball, to your point, PLG, comes out on time, that play's there, and it's either a touchdown or they're down inside the 5-yard line, and everybody's happy. And then you talk about last week, the little dump off to Saquon Barkley. Part of the reason why nobody was near him is because they don't expect that. And they're like, well, they're not going to dump it off. And he makes one guy miss, and he's got a 40-yard gain. So you see some of the effectiveness if you just take those little things versus always trying to find the bigger play. I think there's too much of that. But to expand that out further, if they play like that, and they're a very good team, and let's be honest, I'm nitpicking. They're a very good team, top 5 team in the NFL, one of the legit Super Bowl contenders. Can they win a Super Bowl playing like they're playing right now? If everything stays the same, they're just run heavy, can they win the Super Bowl playing like that?
I mean, I have a hard time believing that when it comes to just like beating the Lions. Look at that offense. It's scoring a lot of points. And I don't think the Lions are going to drop 52 on this Eagles defense, but they're going to put up a lot of points. And I feel like there's going to come a time, and that might be a shootout of a game. And that's what I wonder. Certainly, I've seen Jalen Hurts, be in shootouts before. He was when the Eagles were last in the Super Bowl, and he played an amazing game in that game, obviously. But yeah, I think what it comes down to is like, again, what this passing offense really should be, and the fact that there's meat on the bone here. There's more opportunities that they just can't keep leaving these plays on the field.
BLG, Rams this weekend. How do you see this matchup? The Rams started very slow. They were plagued a little bit by injuries. Now they're 4-1 in the last 5. Win over the Seahawks, and I think they beat, who else did I mention? They beat the Vikings as well in that period. Kind of emerging, finding their rhythm a little bit. How do you view this matchup from afar coming into this game?
Yeah, really interested to see how this Eagles defense, which is known for, being kind of like the anti-Sean McVay defense, Vic Fangio versus Sean McVay, how that matches up.
He didn't take my bait yesterday. I tried to get him. He's like, yeah, it's been 6, 7, like he doesn't remember.
But Matthew Stafford's coming off his best game of the season. He had the 4 touchdowns to 0 interceptions. Obviously, to deal with Puka Nacua, to deal with Cooper Kupp here. Stafford is getting rid of the ball. We talked about average time to throw earlier. The 3rd fastest in the NFL, just behind Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins. I think also Stafford hasn't run at all. So he's really just in the pocket, and getting rid of the ball, making quick decisions. And I'm really interested to see how this Eagles defense holds up against that, especially when they had one of their worst games earlier this season, obviously, when Baker Mayfield was just getting rid of the ball in a flash down in Tampa back in week 4. So really interested to see how this Eagles defense holds up against Stafford, who I think is playing pretty well. And then also, again, these 2 wide receivers and how the Eagles match up against them. Obviously, we would expect to see a lot of probably Cooper on Cooper in the slot there, but also they move Puka Nacua around, and that's I think that's really the big interesting matchup.
Yeah, Puka Nacua is an interesting player. Now, I think he's banged up again. We'll get a better indication of where they are health-wise because he's had the issue, and I think he keeps getting hurt a little bit. So, but he's this big. I think a lot of people don't realize he's this big physical receiver. He's important to their running game. That's a big thing with the Rams. Their receivers have to block, and he's really good at that. I know Britton Covey swears by him. They're good friends. Always talks about him, how good he is, how effective he is. He can do a lot of different things. In a lot of ways, I look at the rest of the schedule, and this is not the best team the Eagles will face by any stretch, BLG. But I think it's the one that could give that defense the most problems. Even talking about Big's history against Sean McVay, Bill Belichick copied it in Super Bowl 53, shut him down. But because of those receivers and the quarterback, I think this is the team where you can't just they spooked Jaden Daniels last week. He didn't even look outside the numbers. He didn't know what he was singing. You can't do that to Matthew Stafford. He's seen everything. From that standpoint, do you see this as one of their bigger tests down the stretch of the season?
Yeah, I do, and it's really I think a sneaky important game because you look at it and it's okay, it's the 5-5 Rams. It's not necessarily a must win at first glance, but first of all, who knows if the Lions are even ever going to lose again? They have some tough games coming up, but they're really good. So if you're hoping to catch them for the 1 seed there, really you might just need to win.
Winning, yeah.
And then this game again, especially because if you come down to the common games tiebreaker, which could be a factor if the Eagles and Lions have the same record. The Lions already beat the Rams earlier back in week 1 this season. So if you lose this one, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough sledding to catch the Lions at that point, especially for that 1 seed. So, I just think it's a really important matchup as well.
Zander?
Oh, my bad, John. I thought you were following up there.
No, I can pop in if you want. I wasn't paying attention myself then, Zander.
No, I was doing a little production on the fly here. BLG, they got a lot of good rookies too on that defensive line with Jared Verse and Fisk, who's supposed to be their I'm not going to say Aaron Donald replacement, but the guy they drafted to put on the defensive line. Interesting matchup from that standpoint. Do you think the Eagles have an advantage there on the lines?
Yeah, that's kind of been, I think, the strength of this Rams defense. It's not really, they're not good for sure as a whole. They're not this, dominant unit. Only 6 teams have allowed more yards per play this season. 9 teams have allowed more points per game. And against the passing attack, the Rams have been especially vulnerable with only 2 teams allowing more yards per pass attempt here. And then 6 teams allowing a higher average passer rating. So talking about Eagles passing game here, if there's a week for them to kind of look good, you would think it should be this week. This is an opportunity.
I said the same thing, and I just keep saying it, and it doesn't work out that way. It concerns me.
Yeah, no, not a guarantee, but if that's something we should say before the game, because then we can measure it against the performance from the game and say, hey, this is a problem, that this was an opportunity for this Eagles passing offense to really do something here. And look, Jalen Hurts looked good. I think he played one of his better games last year in LA. That was a really good game from him. So, there should be an opportunity here for this offense, passing offense specifically, to get going. Yes, that, Rams defensive line, despite the fact that Aaron Donald, who never really had much success against the Eagles with how they game planned against him anyway, is no longer there. But that unit will, I think, be, the unit that will challenge this Eagles offense.
Jason Kelsey used to talk about that, though, and I'm glad he did, BLJ, because he said, you don't know, man, how much we did to stop that guy. So I think a lot of Eagles fans puffed their chest out, rightfully so.
Yeah.
And I bring that out because I got a lot of chest puffing about Quinyon Mitchell this week. I don't know if you're getting the same thing over at bleedinggreennation.com, and make sure you read BLG there and his tremendous staff. But boy, the last thing I want to do is bring down Quinyon Mitchell because he has been an amazing rookie corner. But I've gotten so much. This is the best corner in football this week. I'm like, whoa, we're skipping a lot of steps here. Am I being too hard on Quinyon Mitchell, or are this is the best corner in football people skipping those steps?
Well, yeah, I think best corner in football is a little too gaudy. I think it's all relative to expectation, right? For a rookie to be playing this well, if the feel of it is so special because it's just
phenomenal.
Not. Yeah, you just don't expect. It's not even a guarantee this guy was like starting this year, especially with how the Eagles were using him in training camp. And for him to go from that to being like at least kind of like a Pro Bowl kind of level. Maybe defensive rookie of the year. Big game for that, by the way. Not that like Quinyon Mitchell and Jared Verse go up against each other directly, but if one of those two players has a big game in the same game against the other candidate, well, like let's say Quinyon Mitchell has a pick 6 in this game, and Jared Verse just kind of kept quiet. Well, I think that'd be kind of a big boost for his stock there.
By the way, I wouldn't even dispute him being. I don't think he is because you need at this point. He, as you said, I think to win those awards, you need as a corner to get some interceptions. He hasn't gotten them yet. So if he gets a big pick 6 game against maybe the other big contender, I agree with you. But I wouldn't even if he doesn't have, I think he's been effective enough to be in that conversation.
Yeah.
To be defensive rookie of the year. I think people don't realize, like I brought up those zone stats. Like the Eagles play a lot of zone.
Yeah.
Like he's not out there locking down people, and
he's not prime Darrelle Revis here.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm getting. I think people think he's Darrelle Revis. Good comparison, and I'm like, yeah, this is a very very zone heavy team, and he's doing a phenomenal job. A lot of times, I think it's more difficult for young corners to play that much zone because there's so much communication and so many opportunities to make mistakes versus, pointing at just one receiver and say, go cover that guy. So there's tons of positives. I feel the need to push back when people just go too far. And I'm like, oh, let's give the guy. It's great. Let's enjoy how good it is for a rookie corner to be playing this well. And then also being able to say he's probably not the best cornerback in football yet.
I think that's a fair assessment.
I've been getting killed for that assessment, BLG. Which is, I guess I've been doing this for a long time, obviously, and I shouldn't be surprised by it. But boy, the hyperbole when guys are playing well, it just ramps up. Like Zach Bond. I got a tough time poking holes in that guy.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy's just been.
What more could you want to see?
Yeah. There's Fred Warner and there's Zach Bond.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's crazy, but yes, he's legitimately Pro Bowl isn't good enough. Like Zach Bond is an All Pro right now. We'll see if he keeps it up. But now, if you're deciding the All Pro team, he needs to be on the All Pro team.
BLJ, it feels like every week another million per year gets added on to Zach Bond's value. And every single week I get, boy, I'm excited, but are they going to sign him? What do you think? Where do you think they're going to fall on that? I think that's going to be an interesting thing. I don't know if they'll get it done in year. Maybe they wait till after year, and then you open up the can of worms and maybe another team wants to pay him big bucks. How do you see that potentially playing out?
Yeah, I mean, my thing has always been like, it takes two to tango. And if you're Zach Bond, this is your first opportunity in your career to hit the market at, more valuable than you've ever been.
And probably his last, if we're being real. I mean, he's going to get a 2 or 3 year deal. He's going to be up to 30. That's when that's not his prime time. He's 27 right now.
Good point. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, from his side, he doesn't necessarily need to rush here. So, yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see what his market would be just because of how, I'm sure some teams might view him specific to what the Eagles have done with him. But I mean, when you're kind of having that kind of success, and I think at the end of the day, if he is an All-Pro, like you just don't let All-Pro players walk out the door in free agency. It's not something you do. So
You
I feel like
shouldn't.
you shouldn't.
But
I feel like if he's at that level, I just can't see them not keeping him.
I'm still fearful. Like if he gets to over 10 million, if he continues to play at this level, I can't imagine he's getting anything less than 10 million. And it might go way up from there.
Mm-hmm.
And typical Howie thinking at that position is, oh, we got Jeremiah Trotter waiting in the wings. You can overpay this guy. And a lot of people bring up Saquon, BLG, but here's where I differ with Saquon. As you know, there were always outliers for the Eagles thinking at running back. They loved Christian McCaffrey in 2017. They loved Bijan Robinson coming out. They weren't going to take him top 10, but if he had fallen a little bit, they might have considered moving up to get him in the early 20s, somewhere in that range. They've always had outliers at running backs, whether people knew it or not. I've never heard of an outlier linebacker for this team in this era. I've never even heard a whisper of, oh, but we would do it for this guy. That scares me a little bit because I just think they don't believe in paying this position, and it makes no sense. Every good defense in this league has a big-time linebacker, including the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, and Vic Fangio has been saying that as well. So,
Yeah.
And I think Vic, he's not the GM, but I do think he has influence and will certainly be beating the drum for Zach Bond to be here. Now, I guess if you're looking at it, if you want to make the devil's advocate argument, you could say that, if Vic Fangio can identify someone like Zach Bond and get him in here and get him at this high of a level, maybe in theory he can find the next Zach Bond.
Yeah, Howie's already licking his chops at being able to find that next
that's
$1
right.
million
Yeah.
guy.
But I mean, I wouldn't count on that. I think that's kind of a tall task there.
Yeah. Well, even Vic admits that. I mean,
Yeah.
he's like he didn't know. He just
Yeah.
thought. But if you look at the impact, it's so, Fred Warner obviously being most notable. Ironically, Bobby Wagner's having a great year.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, you talk about Detroit, all of a sudden Jack Campbell's playing great. They got a lot of criticism for that pick.
Yep.
And all of a sudden he's playing great. Minnesota's got Blake Cashman, who they're like Minnesota's 8-2. I think they're 7-0 with Blake Cashman. He's like their AJ Brown. They don't lose when he's on the field. Obviously, they have one of the better. I'm trying to think of the other good defenses in this league, but you get the point. Even Houston has Al Shair. He's a very good player.
And Devin White.
Hi, man, Devin White. Pittsburgh has a guy I thought the Eagles should have drafted. I'm talking off ball, Peyton Wilson, who's playing well. Obviously, they have edge rushers, but
Patrick
every good defense has a good linebacker. Like what? That's the one Howie blind spot I don't get. Now the Eagles, and even the Eagles, when they got it in an unconventional way, but TJ Edwards was playing at a very high level when they went to the Super Bowl. He's got to recognize you need a linebacker, doesn't he?
At least one, I think, too, right? Like, and it wasn't just TJ, too. I mean, Kaiser White obviously had a great year as well, or like good year. Certainly better than
solid. He was a solid player.
Way better than what the Eagles had the next year.
Yeah.
Last year.
Yeah.
So I think at least one. I think that kind of has to be the baseline. Maybe it's like maybe you don't have to pay the resources for 2 stud linebackers, but like maybe have at least one and kind of figure the other position out.
They're keeping N'Kobe and they're letting Zach walk. Is that what you're telling me, BLG?
I mean, I don't think that's the move. I think again, if you have an All-Pro, I don't care. Like you have to make it work somehow.
I agree with you, man. I don't, and I'm with you, John. I don't get how he's a smart guy. Like it's one thing, even the running back thing. I understood that. I'm like, okay, I can understand why he doesn't want to pay big money. A lot of times you can get production out of, late round picks or cheaper guys that, I don't get it. All the great defenses have great linebackers. Why is it so devalued in Philly? I don't know. We'll see what they end up doing. BLG, thanks for joining today, man. Any final thoughts on this game before we get to the weekend? A Sunday night matchup in LA. Back-to-back years, Eagles go to SoFi.
Yeah, again, sneaky important game. Really interested to see how the Eagles look in this one. They it's kind of a nice spot for them in the sense that the Rams, they played on that Monday night game against the Dolphins. They lose that. They have to fly across the country, play the Patriots, fly back to LA. So, they've kind of had a bit of an interesting travel schedule here, whereas the Eagles are coming off this mini bye.
Obviously, and it's a home game too for the
Eagles.
Eagles.
I was going to say, there's going to be a lot of Eagles fans. Last year, that was a factor. They had to go silent count. I'm sure the Rams are going to have to go silent count again in their own building. So also interested in the kind of like the X factors in this matchup.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about. BLJ, thanks for joining, man. We appreciate it. Make sure you guys follow BLJ on X at Brandon Gowton and read all his work at Bleeding Green Nation.
Are you on Blue Sky yet?
That's
BLG?
Right. Yep. You can find me on there as well. Yep.
All right. Getting some Blue Sky love today.
This has now become part of the promotion of the guest. This Blue Sky. I'm out on Blue Sky, everybody. BLG, thanks for joining, man. We'll talk to you
guys.
soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, bud.
Good stuff from BLG there.